Hello, welcome to this course called Theories of Community Development. I want us to have some introduction before we embark on the various theories that underpin community development. One of the areas that I want us to focus on as part of introduction is what is meant by a community, what is meant by development, and again what is meant by community development. It is important to understand these concepts because the various theories of community development that we are going to study in this course should speak to the issues that are found in community and also issues that concern development and therefore broadly the field of community development. It is going to be a discussion that I hope you'll enjoy. Welcome. Concept community has been understood differently by different scholars. Despite the many definitions that underpin the concept, I want us to concentrate on three areas. One, community is understood as a grouping of people with commonality such as norms, religion, values, customs, or identity. Others understand community as a group of people with diverse characteristics who are linked by social ties, share common perspectives, and engage in joint action in geographical locations or settings. Yet, the concept is also understood as aggregate of people who live in a particular geographical locality at a particular time, show a common culture, and exhibit an awareness of their uniqueness and separate identity as a group. When you look at these three definitions, there are important things that come out. One, the concept grouping of people. The other one, commonality of characteristics. Then the third one is geographical occupation of a given area. It means, therefore, when we are understanding or when we attempt to understand the concept community, we need to understand it to mean a grouping of people who have common characteristics and occupy a given geographical territory. This is important because community lives in space, and a space can be defined in the context of a given community. No physical space in the world exists without any semblance of ownership or claim by any given community, whether they're indigenous, whether they're foreigners, whether it is through colonization or any other means. Every geographical territory can be linked to a particular community, perhaps except the oceans. Otherwise, others like lakes, rivers, small streams can be linked to particular communities. Therefore, our understanding of this concept is important because we will need to know that when we are bringing development, or when we understand we want to bring in theories of development, we need to look at those theories in terms of the ability to explain community as a grouping of people who occupy a given area and who bear certain characteristics that are common to all of them. Community can come in many forms, about 5 in number. One is what we call community of interest. The other one is community of action. We also have community of place, we have community of practice, and we also have community of circumstance. What exactly do they mean? This is what they mean. Community of interest simply means people who share the same interest or passion. For instance, you can have a grouping of people whose passion is the practice or conservation of the environment, and they are so much passionate about conservation to the extent that they do all they can at their level, and also through external support, to ensure that the environment is conserved. Then we also have what we call community of action. Community of action are people who are trying to bring change in society. For instance, in any given community or in any given geographical area, there could be a particular grouping of people who feel that certain cultural practices are undermining the well-being and progress of certain members of society. For instance, FGM. So if several people come together and they see the need to champion for the abandonment of such practices, and they consistently do it, we can term that as community of action, because they have come together to unite and change the community from FGM to a different practice. Or it could be a community that is concerned about the violence or conflicts that continue to flare up among different communities. So their concern is, what can we do to stop the inter-community conflicts? So they come together, members from either community, they come together to champion peaceful coexistence of the communities in question. We shall call that community of action. Then we have community of place. Community of place simply are communities of people who are brought together by a given geographic boundaries. It is important to understand that, as we noted earlier, that communities occupy a particular geographical boundary, so that if people live in a particular geographical boundary and they define themselves in terms of that boundary and do as much as they can to protect and ensure that other people do not invade their boundaries, their areas, so that they continue to live harmoniously and continue to preserve their cultural practices. We shall call that community of place. Then we also have another one that we call community of practice. Community of practice are simply people in the same profession or who undertake the same activities. Of course, this one is a concept that does not entirely or strictly apply to our traditional understanding of the word community. It is more being used artificially to refer to people who come together and who share a common profession. For instance, doctors can call themselves a community of doctors. Community developers or students who are pursuing community development can call themselves the same. In that case, we have what we call community of practice. That is, people who have come together to pursue or undertake the same activities of interest. Then the last one is what we call community of circumstance. Community of circumstance are basically people who are brought together by external events or situations. That is, things that are not exactly inherent within the community. For instance, students who come from all over the country or sometimes all over the world and converge in a particular university to pursue a particular course, we may call them community of that particular university. For instance, those who are in Laikipia, both students and lecturers and even non-teaching staff, can call themselves Laikipia University Community. It is because they all find themselves there and brought about by a common goal. One, to pursue a livelihood for the teachers and the non-teaching staff, but also for the students to pursue education. We can therefore call them a community because circumstances have brought them together. A community has certain characteristics that you find to pick community A, community B, community C, wherever they are, they share certain characteristics. And this is what I wanted to look at. One, communities have a shared purpose. That is, communities strengthen and reinforce beliefs and interests and also create a safe space to explore human identity. In other words, every community has a purpose in life and they think that they are responsible to each other. They protect each other. They try as much as possible to create an environment that is conducive to each other. They try as much as possible to follow practices and traditions that they have developed over the years. Although this does not mean that everyone within that community will follow the same beliefs and interests the same way. No. It is possible that some might rebel. We have cultural rebels, so it is possible that some might rebel. But over and above that, majority are likely to subscribe to the beliefs and interests of that particular community. That is the shared purpose that they serve. The other important characteristic of the community of a community is that they have frequent interactions. Members of communities interact frequently because it is through that frequent interactions that provide them with a means of survival. They act frequently to work things together. For instance, things that are common, burial activities, marriage activities, circumcision activities, among others. At times, they also just interact to observe important days in the lives of that community, such as to remember their past heroes or to welcome visitors from other communities. So frequent interaction is also an important feature of a community. However, we need to note that today the kind of interaction that we have is not as frequent as it used to be, largely because of the rise of social media and also the aspect of globalization. These two events that have characterized humanity in recent years have lessened the kind of physical interaction that members of the community might have. So that what we have today is virtual interaction. Interact through communication, the use of modern communication, cell phones, radios, and other means. So physical interaction is greatly undermined through social media and globalization. But even with that, we still create time occasionally to meet, interact, to exchange, to eat together, to laugh, and do a lot of common activities together. Because in doing so, it gives us a sense of belonging and it makes us feel like we are part and parcel of each other. Another important characteristic of a community is pooling of resources. It is important to observe here that not all members of the community can have the same means in terms of power, in terms of wealth, and in terms of prestige. Stratification implies that some are better placed than others. And that is why communities normally come together to pool resources. Resources are pooled together to solve problems that are common to all members of society, provide support to the less fortunate members of society, and also to educate each other. And in doing so, it enhances the survival of the community over time. Otherwise, a community that is not able to pool resources to help those who are in need or to solve problems that are common to all may not survive for long, because challenges that require them to act together, if they don't act together, it can lead to it could be perilous to them. Therefore, one of the things that communities do, or which makes a collectivity of humanity a community, is the ability to pool resources together. That willingness to pool resources together, that willingness to help a member of the community that is less privileged, or less fortunate, or that willingness to come together to solve problems that are common, it is what unites the community and creates a sense of belonging. Thus, the survival of that community over time. Then community also has a shared location. As we noted earlier, boundary or geographical occupation is an important feature in the definition of community. Therefore, communities need a location to congregate and connect, and the quality of the shared space has a bearing on the quality of life of the community. It is for this reason as to why many times we find that where communities are, physical improvement on land is normally done. Provision of road services, provision of water, provision of public and sanitation facilities, all these are done to improve the quality of space that is occupied by a community. To the extent that we describe a particular place occupied by a given community as developed when it has these important utilities. So the provision of roads, electricity, water, sanitation, security, health, and others are designed to improve the quality of that space that is occupied by the community, and by extension, the quality of the lives of the community that inhabit that particular space. Community has certain functions that members play for each other or to the entire society. One of the functions of community is production. Production simply means procreation, or rather giving birth to the young ones and ensuring that they grow and become responsible adults. No community would survive if people are simply dying and they are not being replaced through birth. Therefore, reproduction is an important function of community. It does this by protecting the family and encouraging marriage. Every member of community who is of sound mind and has attained requisite age is normally encouraged to marry. And the wife, the children that have been married are taken care of by the entire community. So reproduction is important, not only to replace members of the community that have died, but also those that have migrated. Otherwise, the survival of the community may not be guaranteed if there is no element of reproduction. Because if people are dying and others are not being born to replace them, then everybody will die and then the community becomes extinct. The other important function of the community is sustenance. Community provides its members with the means to make a living. This may be through agriculture, through industry, or provision of services. Goods must be produced, distributed, and consumed by members of the community. If this is not available again, society might not survive. Rather, community might not survive. Community needs services. Community needs goods such as food, clothing, shelter, and others. These services or goods and services, they enhance the quality of the lives of members of the community. And therefore, it is the sole function of the community to ensure that it plays an important role in its sustenance. Defense is yet another important function of the community. That is protection of members of the community. Protection comes in many ways. One, protecting members of the community from external attacks. Right? If community is attacked by other members of the community, by a different community, it is the responsibility of members of that community to defend it from such external attack. The other defense that is there is community also protects members of the community that are unable to protect themselves, such as children, the aged, persons with disability, and the sick. They need protection from stronger members of society. So the overall goal in society is to ensure that these people are properly protected, not just physically, but also emotionally, and also provided with essential needs for their own survival. It is important. It is the role of society to do so. That's why in many communities, a child does not only belong to the parents, but to the larger community. Same too, the kind of respect that we are called to the elderly. The elderly is meant to be respected universally in the entire community, not just by his or her lineage. It is meant to be everybody. And such respect is part of the emotional and physical defense that we give to such groups of people. Indeed, persons with disability and the sick, we are all required to come to their aid in terms of provision of social support, provision of emotional support, as well as provision of material needs. These are important, and all members of society are encouraged. The spirit of altruism is normally encouraged in most societies, and that is done so as to ensure that people who are not able to fend for themselves, either physically or in terms of provision of essential needs, other members of the community that are privileged enough come to their aid and make their lives better. Another important function of community is socialization. Socialization simply means instilling the right norms and values to the members of the community, especially from childhood up to adulthood. We are all required to observe certain norms and values, and this one, it is also the role of the community to ensure that young people are taught the traditions of what society has been used to, or practices that it has embraced over the years, and which it feels should be transferred to the younger generation. Through modeling, modeling simply means adults are required to behave properly so that they become teachers and role models for the younger generation. But we also engage the younger people through what we call education. We have to educate them, both traditionally and formally, about what's appropriate, what's not appropriate, how to do things. We impart skills in them, and in doing so, we prepare them to become responsible adults or responsible members of society. Social control is also another function of the community. Social control simply means enforcing adherence to the values in the community, right? There are certain things community wants us to do, there are certain things community does not want us to do. If we obey, if we fulfill what society expects of us, or what community expects us to do, we are rewarded for that. But if we go against what is expected of us, we are sanctioned. Right? We are sanctioned. Therefore, rules and regulations are meant to be there in society, and we are all required to ensure that we observe those rules and regulations. If we become obedient to the rules and regulations in society, we are rewarded in many ways. If we disobey them, we are sanctioned, we are punished, and punishment again can come in so many ways, depending on the law or the order that has been broken, and also what a particular society stipulates as the punishment that certain people deserve for breaking certain rules and regulations in society. The last function is companionship. Members of the community need to come together to undertake tasks that are either too complex to be done by one person, or those that are so urgent that need to be done immediately, such that if left one person, it's not possible to be completed. So we are all required to work together, to support each other, to lend a hand, and to ensure that nothing in society fails to work, because within our cooperation, within our collective action, it's expected that unity, nothing can defeat that unity. So that at all times, people encourage volunteers. And through volunteerism, we are able to provide labor, we are able to provide skills, and ensure that society works smoothly. What then is community development? Community development can be understood in two ways: as a process, but also as a discipline, rather a field of study or occupation. As a process, it is where community members are supported by agencies to identify and take collective action on issues which are important to them. That is, it's a process. So that it's a process where people come to the aid of members of the community to help them organize themselves and act in a collective manner to address issues that they consider dear or important to them. That is community development. The United Nations looks at community development as a process in which community members come together to take collective action and generate solutions to problems affecting them. If you look at the second definition, especially the one from the United Nations, the issue of external influence does not come in. It's about community members coming together in a united manner. They identify the problems that they have, and then they generate solutions that they think can best address their problems. That so is community development. The other aspect looks at community development as a discipline, that is, promotes, or a field of study that promotes participative democracy, sustainable development, economic opportunity, equality, and social justice through the organization, education, and empowerment of people within their communities. Important things to see here is that the indicators of a developed community: 1, democracy is participatory; 2, resources are used in a sustainable manner; 3, citizens or members of that community are getting opportunity to pursue their economic goals. The other one is that there is an element of equality and social justice. We don't have outright discrimination. We don't have serious stratification, extreme poverty, extreme wealth. Even if differences are there, because society cannot be perfect, that element of stratification still happens with, then it is much narrower. So that extreme poverty, extreme hunger is completely eliminated. That is an important element in understanding of community development. So interesting for us to observe other definition of development. This is necessary because this entire course is about community development. The emphasis is not so much on community but on development, but with the bearing it has in the community. So that combining this definition and the one that we had earlier, we can say that community development is the process of improving the quality of human lives, right? How do we improve this? We improve this by raising their conditions, that is, their incomes, their consumptions, their levels of food, that is, they become food secure, medical services, and education. That one is raising their conditions, but also creating conditions that's conducive for growth of their self-esteem, human dignity, and increasing their freedom of choice. In other words, when we talk about development, we mean that people's conditions must be raised, right? People's environment must be that gives them dignity, that makes them feel proud, have high self-esteem. But above all, they are people who have freedom of choices. If it's education, they have freedom of choices. That is ability to afford both private, you say, public education. If it is medical services, they also have choices to afford which hospital to go and which one not to go. If it is jobs, they are also able to choose which job that best meets their skills. So when we have an atmosphere in which members of the community can freely choose the direction they take in terms of how they want to advance their lives, that is what is understood by development. But development has also been understood from an economic point of view, so that as an economic concept, development involves the application of certain economic and technical measures to utilize available resources to instigate economic growth and improve people's quality of life. So when we're looking at development as an economic concept, it simply means applying certain economic and technical measures, right, to change the resources that we have and use those resources to advance societies or communities' growth economically and socially, and thereby improve their quality of life. So that if the resource that's available is, say, land, how are we able to use technology and also apply economic measures to increase land production so that we have available food? We can grow cash crops, get money, others supply to the industries, and the incomes that we get out of farming and the income that others who work in the factory they are able to use it to improve their quality of life, meet other social basic needs that they may not have, take their kids to school, attend medical care, buy food, buy clothing, and live in decent housing, access important services such as water in a more reliable and sustainable manner. If they are able to do that, transform the resources, utilize the resources that we have to improve our condition of life, that is development, as understood by economists. But development is also seen as a comprehensive societal process to move the underdeveloped nations from their state of economic backwardness and slow social cultural change by a dynamic state characterized by sustained economic growth and socio-cultural and political transformation that improve the quality of life of all members of society. Of course, when you look at this is the views or the perspective of the modernization theorists who felt that countries in developing countries such as those in Africa or Latin America, they are undeveloped, they are underdeveloped, and therefore development must come in so that it changes the way they do things. It transforms them. It reads of them what Western scholars in the 70s and 60s called backward cultures. And in doing so, they now move forward. But the most important aspect in that definition is that development takes three important facets. There is economic development, there is a socio-cultural development, and also there is a political transformation. In other words, when you talk about development, it's not just economic improvements of society or community, but it's also important cultural changes that are considered essential in providing impetus to that community to move forward. But above all, the political transformation that a country is required to undergo. Such transformation is also important because political leadership come up with policies that can help in better exploitation of resources, that can help in improving governance, that can uplift the less privileged, such as women and marginalized groups, through quality education, and that can also come up with policies and laws that help in fighting cultural practices that have undermined certain sectors of society, such as FGM, early marriages, among others. That is what we mean by development. In our next course, we will look at theory. What is meant by theory? Types of theory, characteristics of theory, and functions of theories. After that, we shall now embark on specific theories of development. Thank you.